So today we're working on patterns for the grown-up Quorn, and we're working on the Workhead base. Now this is my marked up drawing for it. I take these on, I've got these in my iPad, and I just take and mark them up in there, and then I can print out any changes I've made to them and things like that. So this is the Workhead base. I don't know that that's going to be real legible with the scratchings on it and the way I've done it. When I mark them up on the iPad, why I mark them in color so I can see what's going on. But when I just been printing them off on our black and white printer, why that's what I get. So anyway, this was my original pattern for the Workhead base for on the original size Quorn, and this is just a one-piece base. It's you know, and I built this however many years ago I did that I was working on that Quorn, so it's been a whole lot of years. But just a one-piece pattern. I coped it down, and I look at it now, and this is a pretty crude pattern, but it worked just fine for the original. And I'm going to do the grown up a little bit different. This is the round base pattern, and I've got core prints on each end of this. Now I've changed this a little bit because the rocking head lever would sit here on this boss right down here. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put a core print in this. Like I say, the first one was printed without a core, but I'm going to print this with a core print in it, and I'm just going to, my intent anyway is just to use a green sand core in it. And this is my core box, piece of PVC, split down the middle, and I'll just tape it together, ram up my sand core in it, cut it loose. And there again, because this is only needs to build one, or if I mess up, probably two, but I only plan on having to make one pattern or one mold off of this. So that'll be my core. The size of my core print didn't matter to me other than I wanted it to be a standard size PVC. So I just took a PVC, split it, and the ID before I split it was what I set my print at for on the ends. Now this is going to be a split pattern, and I'm going to, the first thing I'm going to do is split it and take the first half, and I'm going to drill it for 2 dowel pins. So I'm just going to use 1/4-inch dowels in them. Once I get that done, I'll put them back together and just drill the other 2 basically freehand. I'll do it on the mill, but I'll do them freehand. So once I've got them flat, then I can lay it down, or once I've got the pins set up in it, that I can go back and use the pins, and I'm not going to probably even install them quite yet. But once I've got the flats done, I can lay half of it down flat. I can take the upper portion of my print, and with it flat, I can just set it together and glue them, and we'll you know, we'll show that when we get there, so you got a little bit better understanding. Once I get both those halves done, or once I get the first half on, I'm going to go ahead and let that dry. Then I'm going to go back and rough cut this portion of the print, and this is that piece. But I want to go ahead and pre-cut my arc in it so that I can, and then I'll glue it back on. So anyway, that's kind of the plan. I've got my 2 halves for my split cotters, and I said way back when I wasn't going to use split cotters, but I'm kind of using split cotters. So I said I was doing this a little bit different for the tilting lever. The tilting lever, like I say, would clamp on here, and that would be our adjustments for that. What I'm going to do is the same thing I did on the base castings, and I'm going to use brass inserts, brass bushings on them. So this will ride, and these will both work together. I couldn't get one long enough to go all the way through the way I wanted it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the longer 3 inches, going to go in one end, and it will be flush, and then the other end that protrudes, we'll push it in with just under 1 inch, extending out the end of that pattern, and that will be the surface that our rocking lever is going to mount to. And I've already got the rocking lever cast, or at least a rough cast of it that I cast some time ago. I don't know if on this particular one if I'm going to split this or if I'm going to use a split cotter. I can still use this rocking lever, but I'll have to manually finish out this end. I'll have way too much material sticking out here if I do that on the rocking lever. So I've already worked my putty knife in one end of this. These 2 halves were put together out of 2 blocks of wood. There's a piece of newsprint style paper in between, just glued in there, so it should release. We'll see if it's actually going to or not. Oh yeah. If you do that with your patterns with a piece of newsprint style paper in between, why they'll let go so you can come up with two halves. And there's our two halves. So I'm going to go over and I think we'll do this half since it's the better one. We got a big knot in here. So we'll do this half. And before we do those, let's mark which way they go together. That'll work just fine. Okay, now, see if we can get these back out. Okay, so in one half, we want a, let's see, did we have a preference on how we put these together? And we really didn't. Let's do this half here, like that. This piece will go up here like this, except this has to go over here because we've got a boss right on the end. So I'm going to take this over to the surface plate, or we're going to go over to the surface plate with it. And our boss goes on, for our split cutter, goes on the clear on the end, right up there on the end of the casting, and we'll fit those in. Before I glue this first one on, I want to find position of it to where this is going to be parallel, or close to parallel. You know, we're not dealing in rocket science here again. But anyway, let's go over to the surface plate and see if we can't figure this out. All right, we just got a piece of paper over the top of this. And what I want is this to go right here. And instead of just using glue on these, I'm going to mix up some body filler. And I'm going to use body filler with it. So I want to have everything situated first. And the reason I'm doing this way is I'm going to have to sand off this top portion. So I actually could glue it on there and hit it with a couple of pins with the pin nailer. Would be work just fine for that. And then go back and sand it. That actually looks pretty good right there. So maybe we will go ahead and do that. We get all tied up with this fancy stuff that we think needs to be a certain way, and none of it is rocket science. Yeah, I'm thinking I like that just fine. Yeah. Okay. So that's where that'll go. And this one has to be shortened up quite a bit too. So let me go ahead, shorten this up so that it fits on there. I'll probably go ahead and put this piece on. It's exactly the same as the last one, except now I have to match it to the back, and then we can put that back portion on. There again, no rocket science here, and we don't need very much of this, but I am just using it as an adhesive right now. We will start to blend stuff in, but this is basically just to stick everything together, and it's so cold out it takes a while for this to dry, so we may not be able to work this for the rest of the day, probably at the rate I'm going. I kind of wanted to get the front portion on there, and we're going to over harden it a little bit too. I wanted to get the front portion on here so that it was all dry, so I could just start building up and finishing on it. But if we don't get that far today, we don't get that far today. We're just going to line this up in between. I might stick a couple of pin nails in this just because we can. I think maybe we will. You know, if we were summer when it was already way hot, why, I just hold this for a couple minutes, it would set and be there. Get a couple pins in there at an angle so they don't scrape up on the surface plate. While I am just using this as my main surface plate, I also realize that this is not a real high quality surface plate, so I'm using it for stuff I probably shouldn't use it for. And it'll take a couple of 3 coats of applications of body filler to get this all filled out the way it needs to be. A little bit low on that surface, so we'll build it up a little bit. That'll give us a good start. Well, there we go. So there's a start. We'll let that cure up probably the rest of the day. There again, not in a hurry. It's cold out here. I'm not too awful ambitious. So anyway, we'll let that dry up and then we'll come back and look at her again. All right, guys. Well, it's next day and we're back working on the pattern for the rocking base. Now, before I went in last night, after I'd shut off the camera and everything, I did put on the little curved portion here. Still got quite a bit of work to do, and basically I'm going to go along and just sand this down so I've got draft all the way around. We'll have to fill a few places a couple more times and then get some finish on it so that it's got a nice smooth surface to do. I'm going to do most of that off camera, so we'll just come back when when I've got something more that more resembles a pattern. Here's the comparison to the original Quorn. This is up 33%. So far it looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. As a little side note, I have been working the casting stuff here the last few weeks, and I've been working on match plate patterns for stuff. I think I'd mentioned that before. But anyway, I've been using my sand muller quite a bit. And if you guys have followed me long enough, you know that I built a Chastain style sand muller with a few little modifications, but pretty much close to his thing. I've been running that for, I don't know exactly how long now, at least a year, I think. And just did a little update. Now, it's got plenty of power. It works really well. A few little tweaks I need to make to it yet as time goes on, but maybe I'll show some of those later on. But anyway, in the book, he says that his muller had plenty of power the way he built it. And when I was working mine here the other day, I thought I'm going to take a little bit of time and tune it a little bit more and tune the way the plows scrape, because I was having to go back in and scrape a little bit of compacted sand off both the bottom and the outer rim of the drum. If you do build one of these, make sure that you've got your drum square and flat so your surfaces are good with your center pillar. Mine's out just a little bit, so it'll scrape on one side and I've got a little bit of extra room on the other. And same way on the bottom, there's a couple of places that it will scrape pretty hard and still leave a quarter of an inch it starts out with, or 3/16 of an inch, but then it builds up as you get sand built up without scraping that off. So I thought, well, I'm leaving too much sand both on the bottom and on the side, so I'm going to adjust my plows just a little bit. Well, I adjusted the plows a little bit, had them hang up, and had to straighten up one part of the plows, and adjusted a little bit more, ran a little bit more, and hung it up. And this started out as 3/8 by 2 inch flat bar, and now it's got this little whoopty. And it did stall out the muller finally when I did that, but that's how much power it's got, is it just folded that up two ways. You know, this started off being straight this way, so it's tweaked this way, but it's also twisted up this way. So just a little side note, thought you might find that interesting. Muller works well, but so I've got to build a new part for this before I really do much more with it. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get to work on this pattern, and we'll bring you back in a bit. All right, guys, real quick little update before I go in for the day. It's cold out here this morning. So I've got my patterns pretty well done. I've got the first coat of primer on them, and I'll bring you down here and show you real quick in just a minute. And that's kind of where we're at today. I'm going to let this dry the rest of the day since it's so cold out here. And tomorrow I'll come out, sand them out. I see a couple little adjustments I need to make, and I'll probably prime them again and let that dry another day probably, and then go back and just put some top coat on them just to make sure I've got a nice smooth finish on them, and then they'll be ready to cast. Along the way, here's gears for the Sheldon. I just went ahead and painted up the insides of them so they match, and I'll flip them over, paint the other sides tomorrow at the same time I'm doing everything else, and at least I can get the tumbler gear assembly back together. All right, so here's our patterns, front and back. If you look on this right-hand pattern right there where the angle plate will go to show the angles, degree angles on it. Well, I got a little yuck in there that I didn't get cleaned off. And this other little front plate goes to the milling machine project. It's the cover that goes over the elevation screw on the production lathe. They don't use an elevation screw there. It just gets covered with a blank plate. And that's a 3D printed part that I did quite a while ago. It's just been sitting around. So while I was filling and sanding and priming stuff today, well, I went ahead and did that real quick, so that's out of the way. I can cast that up along the way at any time and throw it into my box of parts for the milling machine. Anyway, that's what we got for you today. Okay, well, we're out here freezing our asses off this morning. Not going to be for very long, another hour and a half or so. We have got this far with our pattern, and I'm going to go ahead and cast this pattern, or I'm going to attempt to cast this pattern, ram it up and cast it. I could use one more coat of filler on it probably, and a couple of holes to fill in the top and bottom and all of that good stuff. But the reality is I need one of these. So I think we're going to go ahead and try and cast it. I'm just figuring my scheduling, and if I don't cast this today, why, it's going to be the end of the week at the earliest before I can get back to it again. I got things going on all week. So I'm going to at least get this one rammed up and try and cast it, assuming it rams up well and we get a good print on it. And while I'm doing, I'll probably throw this little cover in, just because that way I've got that done and out of the way. So, all right, well, hopefully we've got a little bit of a view here. This is going to be quick and dirty. Like I say, this is not dealing with rocket science here. So Actually, this is not what we want at all. Let's stop and think about what we're doing here. Let's do one of those, and I think we will use, oh, maybe we'll use one of these flasks. Except I think this does fit a follower board. So let's use one of these. Yep, that works fine. Let's change that around just a little bit here. That's going to feel better. Yeah, that'll be fine once we get her going here. So let's start off like this right here. And I think we'll feed right in here, probably just right. Well, this is the drag anyway. We'll do that, and then we'll do this. And that'll be plenty close enough. Let me get my coffee cup out of here so I don't fill it up with parting dust and sand. Sand's just a little bit wet, but when it gets this cold out, it's kind of hard to tell exactly what your sand texture is. So it feels a little bit damp to me, but I think the reality is once we actually start working it, it'll be just fine. I really should have got a coat of finish on that side, but now I think when I gate this way, we're just going to gate it right into the side here. We might go here and here, and just one over here. We're going to vent right into this portion here, and we're going to vent it pretty heavy because I'm going to machine that surface off anyway. Yeah, we're a little wet. We'll know when we cast this if we've got too much moisture in it. Well, this may be a complete and utter failure today because this feels a little too damp. We get a little fallout around the edges. Not too awful bad. I think we'll run with this so far anyway. Yeah, let's go ahead and gate it down this side too, just because we can. Come on now. Yeah, I think we can live with that. There again, neither of these are production molds, so I'm not that awful concerned about a little bit of fallout with them. All right, there's the first part of the puzzle. Now, before we go any farther with that, let's set this back down here. and get it out of the way so we don't rattle it. Too bad anyway. And let's take our little core box and just see how this is going to ram up. Okay. Give that. Now the question becomes, will this hold together enough to I think that looks pretty good. So now, let's take this one. Okay, if we vent there pretty heavy, and we can put one vent right down here through this boss, because that will be machined out. Everything here looks pretty good, I think. We got runners, we got all our gates. And there's the way we look inside. There again, this wouldn't make it as a production mold, but for this little one-off of each of these parts. I think that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. As long as the core holds where it's supposed to. Why, I'm going to be very happy with all of this. I think. Like I say, hopefully we're not too wet. Hopefully we've vented enough to where it will gas off the way it's supposed to. I think everything looks good there. I think that looks good. I think since I've got that core in there, rather than just weighting it, I think I'm going to clamp them. I think. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get the furnace fired up. I still got to ram my sprue. But I think we'll go ahead. I'll get the furnace fired up and we'll come back and just do a little visual of the pour. All right, I didn't degas this. This is fairly clean material. I did just flux it. So Let's open her up and skim it. Getting ahead of ourselves again. Okay, that looks really good. As I say, this was clean material, so I didn't degas it. It had been degassed. I've cast this before, and then I run it back into ingots. So we just fluxed it, skimmed it, looked like it poured good. I don't think I've got any complaints with that at all. So hopefully it looks pretty good. As long as we didn't get a bunch of crap fall in when we put the core in, which I don't believe I did, or put the top on, why, I think we're good to go. So we'll let this cool for a little bit and then we'll come back and take a look at it. Well, we probably should wait a few more minutes, but I'm kind of impatient here, so. Trying to get in the habit of mulling my sand when I do my shakeout, but since I haven't repaired my plow on the molar, why, we're just going to shake her out right here. I'll add a little water later today after it starts cooling down, and keep it a little bit moist, and that will work for us. Yeah, it was a little bit wet. And I say that just from looking at how how porous we are there. It's not bad. It'll be fine. But I've been getting a little bit better finish on them than that. What if we do that the right way? That looks better. Yeah, that's a casting I can work with. Let's see what the core looks like once we get it punched out of there. You got just a little bit of a shrink cavity right there, but not bad at all. That will still work. I got no complaints with that whatsoever, I don't think. Okay, let me go cool this, and I'll be right back. Alright, well, got just a little bit of a shrink cavity here, and have just a little bit of a shrink cavity on each of these runners. So that's alright. It's still perfectly safe, usable. There's no problem at all. Core worked really good. I don't know if you can see down in there or not, but that's a really nice core in there. You know, its finish is actually just as good, if not better, than what's on the outside. Got a little more dirt in there. I got one place where it started to crack, and I saw that when I assembled it. So it left the mark down in there. There again, I don't know if you can see that or not. Probably not. But it will, that gets machined out anyway. So that's, I think I'm happy with that, you know, unless I run into some problems along the way. Why, otherwise it looks pretty good. So anyway, I'll get it broken down, and we'll take one more look at it after we get all the stuff cut off of it, and we'll see what it looks like. Alright guys, so there's our part. Got just a little bit of a shrink pocket there. We've got so much material here it doesn't make any difference. And we've got a little shrink pocket on either side. Just a very small one. You know, I probably could have fed another riser through there, done a little bit different gating, something like that. On one-off stuff like this, I don't get overly concerned. You know, as long as it's going to do what I want it to do, why, I'm perfectly happy, and this is going to be a good casting. The only thing I see that may be an issue, and it's because I've scaled it up, and I'll have to finish laying it out and start machining it before I know. But since I set this up for split cotters, rather than splitting the castings along the edge, like here, why this boss is a little bit bigger, this boss is a little bit bigger. So I'm hoping we don't have any interference here. You know, that may be my only issue, is these two bosses contacting there. And we got a nice bore in it. I still got a little bit of sand and stuff in it. Now I've got grinding shavings in there, but nice bore in it. You know, that'll machine out just fine. the way it will machine out is the longer piece will get pressed in here in this end, and then it'll protrude out this side an inch for our rocking lever. So that's going to work good, and the other bushing will go in the other end. It gives them, oh, they almost meet up in the middle, not quite probably, but we'll get good support as it rides along the bar. So I think I'm very happy with that. So there's one more piece of that puzzle done. You know, that's another step forward, and I did want to get it cast today if I could, because as I said, I'm not going to have time the rest of the week to do much. I may be able to sneak out and machine a little bit, but running that smaller crucible in there, I had molten metal ready to pour in about 20 minutes. And then this is our other little cover that goes on the milling machine, and I just knocked the crap off of it. I haven't sanded it. We'll have to match the holes, drill them up, and everything. Looks good. It'll work real well for what it's supposed to do. So hopefully find something a little bit useful there, entertaining at least. So comments and suggestions, leave them in the comments section for me below, guys. And as always, thanks for taking the time to watch.